Let's talk about the real cost of planning failures, the real cost in how poor planning practices, policies, and processes translate to extra one naira, extra one kobo on the cost of housing. It's easy, for example, to just blame inflation, cost of cement, cost of materials, because these are measurable metrics. So, without speaking too much grammar, let's look at how really this lack of infrastructure that we say, this deep structural decay that we always mention every time, and even the time wasted in traffic or waking up by 4 to resume work at 9. How does each and every of these effect of poor city planning translate to an higher cost for you to pay for housing? So to make this relatable, let's do a real life walkthrough of the processes that go into building a house and a few of the friction points that that process have with planning, and see directly how these friction points influence everything that goes into the process and how it directly drives up the cost that you and I pay for housing. So number one is land, because to build anything, you need land. And one of the things that affect the price of land is whether it has title or it does not have title. Let's even forget the fact that this is also one of the direct implications of poor land registry and titling processes, which is as a result of the fact that rather than create systems to put structure into how approval is done, to put structure into how land is purchased, acquired, and titled, we were running after revenue. But I digress. The point is the fact that due to these poor land titling processes, we've given so much room to speculation. And this is how that happens. So a land that does not have title yet can sell for 100,000, but once it has title, it sells for 1 million. And it's easy to conclude that the reason for this is pure greed. Meanwhile, what goes into that cost, into that price, is not just cost of land plus cost of title. That cost also includes stress, legal risks, delays, inconveniences, come tomorrow, and even settlement. So while we may argue that all of these additional expenses, additional intangible costs that we cannot quantify do not justify 100% or a 200% difference in the price, the fact remains that these costs are directly garbaged out to the land buyer or the final home buyer. And all of this is no thanks to the poor ways that planning manages, handles, transfers, or documents land. So that is that for land. After land, the next thing is you do your design and you apply for approval. And even if you've not interacted with physical planning before, I am confident that you've had one or two people describe their unpleasant experience with physical planning or approval office. And why the details of individuals' experience with physical planning may be different. The one thing that is common to all is that the approval process takes too long. The direct effect of this delay is not only in the time wasted, but also in the effect of that time wasted on capital. So imagine that you have 24 months to pay back a loan. And out of that, you've wasted 6 months of your capital doing nothing, just lying idle, not generating income. And you cannot do anything that helps that money generate its interest, waiting for approval. So what happens is the cost of that capital gets more expensive, and garbage in, garbage out. This increased cost gets transferred to the buyers. So that is approval, and how delay in approval, the long bottlenecks, bureaucracies, office procedures, and long inconvenient office processes add to the cost of housing. Number 3 is poor infrastructure planning. This is the one that has the maximum effect on the cost of housing, because due to the lack of utilities and basic amenities such as road, drainage, electricity, water, the developers or building owners are forced to produce this themselves. So they become the government producing water, producing road, electricity, utilities, all at their own cost. And what happens at the end of the day as a result is that the buyer or the homeowner is not only paying for the building, you are also paying for infrastructure. And the painful part is that you already pay tax, multiple even in some cases. But unfortunately, apart from influencing development cost, this same lack of infrastructure also affects livability, which is the fourth way poor planning practices affect cost of housing. And this has a cyclic effect on both buyers or developers. Because what happens here is, even though approval offices are perfect at torchlighting individual homes, checking sizes of doors, sizes of steps, sizes of rooms to see whether they are good enough, whether they follow standard, Unfortunately, on the flip side of that, which is the major large-scale city planning function of the ministry, these agencies and ministries have failed to make the city work according to standard. And because directly, this lack of infrastructure affects livability, that is quality of life of the people. After the house is ready and available to the market, quality of life then becomes an important consideration in whether the buyer buys or not. And the longer that it takes is the longer it takes for the developer to recoup its cost. And this, in return, affects the cost of capital, which directly affects the cost of sale of such housing. So, yes, this doesn't look good at all. And that brings me to what I hope to achieve with this, which is the consciousness to the fact that this planning failure is a multiplier of housing cost. While the basic principle says business is equal to cost plus margin, in this case, the effect of these planning failures is cost times margin. Whether you look at the processes or the outcomes, the only way to recoup all the interest, the stress, the delays, and the inconvenience is only by the price of housing. So if land affects capital exposure and planning delay increases the cost of financing the project, and then infrastructure gaps increase the cost of development, and 4, uncoordinated city planning makes quality of life and livability more expensive, and which in turn affects how quick or how slow the building is sold, then the only way to recoup all these costs is to multiply the margin to the real cost of producing such housing. So this is how poor city planning is the number one multiplier of housing cost and the biggest compounder of the housing crisis. Because each of these friction points in poor planning practices or planning policies or planning procedures do not manifest alone. Rather, they stack on one another and they only show when it is time to pay for such housing. So yes, if we want affordable housing, we must address inflation. We must also talk about the price of cement. But most importantly, we must address our city planning. We must reform our planning policies, processes, and procedures. If housing exists as an ecosystem and all these friction points end up affecting and influencing the cost of housing, then it is time to address and see our planning also as an ecosystem, one that thrives and does better and serves the people better when all its moving parts sinks into one holistic framework that is smart, responsive, and which works to meet the quality of life expectations of the people. I hope this helps.